So there's a theory that it's the Earth's orbit that is responsible for the change in the weather, like global warming. Apparently the Earth is on some kind of axis. If that wave is or tilts, it changes the weather from if it tilts a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. It will cause weather extremes that include global warming. Usually people say humans are responsible for global warming. However, some people are trying to say it actually might be the orbit of the Earth, the way the Earth is angled. Just say the sun is here and the Earth moves its axis to be here. And it never moves that much, but say it did. The sun's rays, which were once hitting from this direction, is now hitting a completely new direction. It's hitting down here, and that's causing weather extremes. So it's an okay theory, but not everyone will agree with it. This is because of things like deforestation. So what happens when there's no forest? The coastlines, they crumble and let in more water, and the water floods the land and causes swamps. When there's no trees, you get something like deserts, like those, mountains and mountains of sand and no forest. This is because there's nothing there to grow, and so with no trees, everything goes until it's desert, and deserts are hot. There's no shade in a desert. Nothing can grow. It's just hot sand. It's like making the world out of cement, really. What's the difference between a grassy knoll, a grassy hill, and a cemented hill? The grass feels cool, natural. The cement feels hot, radiates humidity, reflects humidity from the sun, whereas a grass will take in some of that humidity and provide some sort of coolness. So with something reflecting the sun's rays, you get global warming, or a change of atmosphere, which is often hot, humid, contains radiation, as opposed to grass, which is cool, refreshing. It provides food for animals and shade and coolness. So that's why no one believes that humans are not responsible for global warming. If they made the world out of cement, it would be all these things. It wouldn't be cool, refreshing, have food, provide shade. It would be hot, humid. and radiate heat, and that would increase the temperature and make a hot area, which would in effect change the weather and increase global warming. So in the past, when there's been large cases of deforestation, what has happened? The weather has changed. They needed to invent a Julian calendar to change the cycles of the world so that people can grow crops. So with weather changes, there needed to be a new calendar, and this replaced the old calendar. So farmers could follow the new calendar and grow their crops in cycles, because the old way of growing crops and following the weather had become extinct. It was no good. Crops failed, and when crops failed, people starved. And so this new calendar was invented so that people could grow their crops in season and not starve. And this was because of some weather change that happened during the time of Julius Caesar, and we've stayed with the Julian calendar since. And this old way, this old calendar, which used to exist, has long been extinct. So this is why a lot of people want to blame human behaviors for global change, the change of the weather. But this orbit kind of idea is interesting. Who knows? Maybe with the sun shining on a different corner of the earth, even if it's just a millimeter across, would make some kind of global effect. But not everyone's buying it, because everyone thinks things like deforestation is a major impact, and that's human activities. They know if you take away trees, you'll end up with deserts. You know, if you don't have trees by the coastlines will end up becoming swamps, and there'll be less coast. This is why there are trees on coastlines, because to combat the incoming of water. So so no one quite thinks this orbit idea is that valid. But there are other ideas which could bring forth global warming. It could be a natural cycle. The world's weather just might change. It's changed before. That's why the Julian calendar was invented. And it just has to go back into the old cycle. And no one will know. No one knows the old calendar. The calendar people were using before the Julian calendar. Some people would figure it out because the Julian calendar only slightly made changes, like adding leap years. I think the 7-day cycle was so as I was saying, if the weather if the old weather pattern that was created before the Julian calendar came back, scientists would be calling that weather change, not a change of cycle that will parallel the world to how it once was. So they won't necessarily immediately link, oh, the weather's changed, oh, it links to the old ways and that were created before this calendar began. Oh, this is like how it used to be. They won't say that. They'll say it's some sort of weird environmental change that doesn't fit in with the world, and they'll try to explain the reasons for it. So not everyone will agree that it's a natural event, but sometimes people do think the change of the weather is a natural thing. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold, but whatever's happening, it's a way of the world. It just happens, and you put up with whatever happens. So some people do try and say it's natural, others say it's from outer space. Something with the alignment of planets, something about the tilt of the earth, sometimes something about gravitational pulls, something about the sun and its position in the sky. They blame weather changes on outer space activities. They think a meteor crashed into a planet, it created a flare, that flare impacted space, and it came to Earth in a wave that caused some sort of tilt in the weather, things like that. Some people think that it's government that controls the weather. Weather is not a pattern, that a natural pattern. It's something that people can actually control now. The government just presses a button and they can create clouds or changes of the weather, which include storms, or they can create cyclones or tornadoes. They can create drought. All these things the government can actually create because they know the science of weather. They know how it's created, and so what they do is they release things into the atmosphere, or they release waves, radio waves, whatever, to be able to create weather. So it's a government controlled thing. If they want a place to be drought ridden, they'll keep it hot. If they want a place to be covered with floods, they'll make a storm. People think the government controls the weather. So there are many theories. Over weather change in the world, but people think the orbit of the Earth is too far out. A lot of people want to say humans were the first to create global warming by deforesting forests and making pollution like fire. Too many fires, too many trees being cut down, too many fires, and that is what started global warming. That's continues to be what creates global warming. But yeah, no one can really know. It's all just a block of theories. But these are a good few categories of what people think and what they base their theories on, really, when they're thinking about global warming. Most people agree it happens. most people agree it will never stop. And no one has any idea how the world, whether it's going to change. They just know it can.